I woke up one day and I couldn't see. I was around 15 years old and I'd actually gotten up to study for a Hindi test that morning. And you know how sometimes when you wake up early in the morning, not having had a good night's sleep, your eyes feel a little crusty or tired, so that's what I assumed it was. Naturally, I was concerned, so I ran into my parents' bedroom, woke them up and said, hey, I can't exactly see anything. They're like, oh, don't worry, just go back to sleep, it'll be fine. I knew something deeper was going on, so I picked up the phone and called my grandfather, who happens to be an eye doctor and an eye surgeon who was in Delhi at the time. I called him and I said, hey, this is what's happening, I can't really see. He said, monitor the situation, and if it doesn't get better in the next hour, immediately go to the hospital. So I go back to my room, the sun rises, and immediately I have this huge throbbing headache in my orbit, this region. Anytime there's any light near me, I just cannot handle it. So I sit with a blanket over my head, trying to figure out what to do. At that point, of course, my parents figured out something was seriously wrong, and we called our local doctor and immediately rushed to the hospital. By the time I reached the hospital, my headache felt like I had 10 migraines at once, and the doctors all rushed to try to figure out what was wrong. I had every test imaginable, from a CT scan, to an MRI, to a spinal tap, to you name it. I was in there for what felt like an hour, but was actually 15 minutes, and if you've never gotten a resonance MRI before, essentially you're put into this metal tube, and there's all of these sounds made that are trying to match with the resonance maps of your brain or whatever part of your body they're trying to map out. 15 minutes later, what I assume was done, I'm rolled out and the attendant is like, hey madam, we're going to need you to remove andar ka vastra. And I was like, what are you talking about? Apparently, my bra had a metal wire in it that was interfering with the system. I had to remove that and restart the whole process again. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and doctors flew from different parts of the country to see what was going on because it was a unique case for them and nobody could figure out what was happening. And those 2 weeks were a lot. Not only was my vision gone in my left eye, but I was on all sorts of medicines and steroids and just pretty much everything for them to figure out what was going on. I was missing school, and this was a couple months before my board exams, which, if you don't know what those are these incredibly important exams in the 10th and 12th grade in India that often help determine somebody's future. There were multiple diagnoses, everybody was trying to figure out what was going on. Eventually the diagnosis was optic neuritis, which basically means the inflammation of the optic nerve. But what had happened was I had a brain virus that had demyelinated my tissue around my optic nerve and therefore had affected my vision. Super simply explained, demyelination is the removal of the myelin sheath which coats our neuron. Think of your neurons like a wire, right? When you have an electrical wire in a house, it usually has some sort of a coating to protect you from getting shocked. Similarly, each of our neurons, or our brain cells, have these protective coatings called myelin sheaths. And the way that we actually have an impulse transfer is there's gaps between those myelin sheaths called synapses. And so the way that information is transferred from some impulse to our brain and vice versa is through these synapses, so they go really speedily. That's why you don't really perceive the time it takes between an impulse and a thought for yourself. But in this case, the myelin sheath had been removed, so the transfer was much, much slower. It had impacted essentially the impulse transmission or my ability to see in my left eye. Fortunately, it did also mean that it was potentially reversible because instead of affecting the rods and cones, which are the part of your eye that determine whether you can actually see, it was to the nerve. And if we were able to reverse this, my vision would come back. I got back home from the hospital. The good news was that my vision would mostly recover within 6 months with proper treatment. But the bad news was, given it was a brain virus, it had also affected a little bit of my memory. The recovery was hard because, as I mentioned, I was in the middle of preparing for these really important exams, and I couldn't remember what we'd studied in history a month ago. I couldn't remember my English literature text. Couldn't remember anything, and I remember sitting down and obsessively trying to do math. I was like, math is logical, I should know this, and I couldn't. And I broke down because until that point, so much of my identity had been wrapped up in being a good student, being a topper. And if that was taken away, it was really an existential question of who was I, what was my place in the world, and what mattered to me. But the thing I did remember was music, and it's really, really what got me through that time. Singing. I've been singing since I was very young, many different styles, piano. It's always been something that I had enjoyed, but in that moment, it was so much more than that. It was so much more than this hobby or passion. It was what saved me. It was this incredibly powerful medium, and whatever I did in life, I knew music had to be a part of it. Because if it could have that power on me, just one random individual, imagine the power it could have on so many people. I wasn't new to medical issues. I was born with a hole in my heart, and essentially it had caused the pure and impure blood to mix. Now, typically when that happens, you either need surgery or it can get into dangerous complications. I got really lucky and mine closed up naturally when I was around 4 or 5, but my parents, God bless them, had to be so careful when I was young to make sure I didn't fall too sick, protect me. And I can't even imagine the strain it had on them. Already as new parents, already trying to navigate the craziness of life. I've had an insane medical journey with my teeth, with my intestines, with so many different parts of my body. But in all of these cases, I got really lucky because a lot of the conditions I had, if I didn't have access to proper, timely care, or if my family didn't have the money to pay for it, I would be dead, quite literally. And that is something I do not take for granted for even 1 second. And I think when you've been in situations that you know that you've been so close to not making it, or that there's so many people who in your position would not be here, it really reframes privilege. It really reframes access. It really reframes, is it a fair system that some people get to access things by virtue of money or network? All my grandparents were doctors, and the day this happened, I was able to call my grandpa. Had I not called him then, and had I waited 2 hours later, it may have been irreversible damage. And as a young person, I thought I wanted to be a dentist and a doctor, and then when I was a teenager, I realized that I wanted to look at issues more broadly, and I've always been very interested by the health world and recognizing the huge inequities we have in our systems globally and the importance of access. You may or may not know this, but I actually studied global health and psychology in college, but I also studied music because I ended up doing a dual degree at Harvard and the Berklee College of Music, and it was such a blessing to be able to access amazing knowledge, information, people, networks in both of these spaces, and just recognize that there is so much power and potential to talk about things that matter, but in ways that connect with people, whether that's through music, whether that's through conversation, whether that's pretty much through any medium that you can connect with somebody emotionally, not just intellectually. And I guess for me, losing my vision helped me find my voice, and I recognized that no matter what I did in life, I wanted to use my voice. When you've been afforded a lot in life, whether that's through privilege or position or power or a platform like this, there is a lot of responsibility that comes with it, and in my opinion, almost a duty where the baseline that you can do is help increase access. And what I realized kind of throughout all of these things was power of music and people wanting to deeply connect with that. Yes, there's so much important intervention that needs to be done in the medical system, in our global health infrastructure, in so many different things, but the average person does not have access to information about their own bodies. We don't talk about things like puberty and periods and mental health and sex, or heart health and diabetes and so many other things that are so important and impacting people in our populations every single day. And I think it's just the smallest ways in which we can all contribute to spreading conversation and awareness about all these things is important. And so for the longest time, I thought that I would be in that space and figure out how to combine music and the arts with it, or the power of media. And funny enough, a few years later, when I was around 17, I got the opportunity to play the lead role in this show called Agnes of God. It was a singing and acting show. And a few days before our opening night, we received a call saying that somebody had filed an FIR against us and wanted to arrest us. I won't bore you with these details in this video. There's another video you can watch which details all of that. But the long and the short of it is, and it was crazy. If you're curious, you can Google Agnes of God controversy and you will see dozens and dozens of articles about the whole situation. But that experience taught me so much about the power of art in and within itself. I think till that point, I had seen music, art, media, all of these things as really powerful mediums. But in those moments, at least that experience taught me how it can truly be a vehicle, because we were putting up a show that touched upon themes like child abuse, mental health, and difficult topics that were considered taboo, and it had an impact, and it was powerful, it was moving, and the story mattered, and that made me recognize that all stories matter. Everybody's stories matter, and if the least we can do in this lifetime is tell ours honestly, others tell theirs honestly, and amplify voices that don't have the same privileges that we have. The scratch of a surface of a life that is heard, that is seen, that has a voice, and yeah, I guess my mission since then has always been, how do I use my voice in its multiple ways? And that's what I've been attempting to do in different ways, and will continue to do in different mediums, in different avatars, if you will, throughout my life. And that's kind of what guides each and every decision of mine, where is this honoring my voice? Is this honoring somebody else's voice? Is this honoring the ability to use it? Because you can lose any of these things at the drop of a hat. You can lose your vision, you can lose your voice, but the true essence of who you are will always be seen, be heard, and have importance. And yeah, that's my reflection for today on this story that I know was morbid, but turned out into this silver lining eventually, I guess. Yeah, anyway, if you're curious about this or have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And fortunately or unfortunately, I actually have many, many more stories like this about different life events that have impacted who I am today and why we are here. If you're curious about those, let me know in the comments below. And yeah, please, if you've had an event in your life or just something that you think really impacted and shaped the way you think today or who you are, what is that? And if you feel comfortable sharing, I would love to know. And yeah, I mean, also, I know we've been absent on this channel for a while in this chatting capacity, but I am now excited to use this version of my voice again and share much, much more with you. So stay tuned every week, and hopefully there will be stuff that is a combination of learning, community, and fun. That's really the hope. Anyway, sending you lots of love. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.